What is up, you guys? This is Mike here from the N.G.F podcast page, and we are back with N.G.F television reviews this time, and we're going to be talking about the Disney Plus series Loki, starring Tom Hiddleston. And just so you know, guys, this is going to be an overall spoiler discussion for season 1, because it was just announced today that there will be a season 2, which I am very stoked about. Just going to give you my overall thoughts to begin with before I go into the breakdown of how I felt about each episode. Overall, I felt the series was lacking substance. It was good in certain areas and it was bad in others. It was a little convoluted, as is any TV or movie that features time travel as a main plot device. It can get heavily convoluted very fast. But overall, as a vehicle for pushing the MCU forward, it very well succeeds in that by introducing to us our potential big bad for the next few phases of the MCU. It's not confirmed that he will be, but it's sort of looking like that will be the case with King the Conqueror. And I know that was the prevailing fan theory. At first, I didn't really buy it, but then as I started seeing all the Easter eggs being explained on YouTube and all that, I sort of saw how they were setting that up, which was nice. But so let's just go to the breakdown of each episode. So episode 1 through 2 are your basic setup episodes, being that they introduce the new characters, set up the beginning plot, etc., etc. It does a great job of introducing us to the Loki that we haven't seen since the first Avengers film. You know, that would-be king who was burdened with glorious purpose. It does a really good job of expediting his growth that we saw him experience in the next few MCU films leading up to his death in Infinity War. And that was one of the biggest concerns I had, is because I really liked Loki's growth. So it was nice to see that he was able to get to that point again via convenient clip show montage. It was cool to see the character of Loki and Tom Hiddleston bring that nuanced performance that he's so good at, which is, you know, showing a god who goes from being this arrogant, ego-driven conqueror to being very vulnerable in an instant. And you haven't seen that type of vulnerability that he shows in this movie since, I feel, the first Thor movie. You know, when he was that man who found out that his family was lying to him for all of his life, essentially, and he just wanted the truth for once. So I like that they brought that back around. And episode 2 is more of them setting up like a buddy cop type or buddy time cop type of show, with Loki and Mobius hunting down the Loki variant that is out there, with, for lack of a better word, causing mischief for the TVA. Episode 2 ends with the reveal that it is a female variant of Loki who goes by Sylvie. Episode 3 is where it slows down a little bit. Now, I know a lot of people hate on episode 3. I find it an interesting breakaway from the pace of the show. I really found it to be the most expensive bottle episode in television history. And for those of you who don't know, a bottle episode is basically when a TV show, due to budget restrictions, needs to make a cheap episode. So they'll basically take a handful of characters, usually 2, maybe 3 at most, set them in one specific location and just film around that, as opposed to having a full-blown episode take place in multiple locations. And I kind of feel like that's what they were going for in this one, only obviously with a bigger budget. It was really more of a way to express the connection and the chemistry between Tom Hiddleston and Sophia DiMartino, who plays Sylvie. And for a lot of people, it didn't really work. And for me, it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't at the same time. Mainly because you literally only got like 2 seconds of her at the end of the second episode. So to have an entire episode dedicated to try to build this chemistry and connection didn't really make sense. Like, if this was something that they should have done more so in the 4th episode, and have her presence be more fleshed out in a previous episode before they stuck them on a planet together. So episode 4 goes back into the meat of the story and starting to answer some of the narrative questions we've been asking as an audience member. And the most interesting part was that they introduced the timekeepers, which you would think that they would have done that at the end of the series, but lo and behold, timekeepers were just decoys, puppets being puppeteered by the true mastermind behind the TVA. So that leads into episode 5, which really delves more into the cosmic side of things, like the void, the end of time, and this is where it really sets up who the villain is going to be in episode 6. And I liked episode 5 somewhat. I didn't love it like a lot of people did, not as much as I liked episode 4. And it just felt to me episode 5 was asking more questions that were all going to need to be answered in a single episode in episode 6. That's kind of what I didn't like about it, and it just kind of felt paint by numbers. Didn't really do anything extraordinary. Episode 6 is an amazing episode. I thought it was a perfect way to end the series, minus some few glaring flaws in character, because like I said, they were setting up this relationship between Loki and Sylvie in the past few episodes, and I started to buy into that relationship, that these were two people who really could not trust each other because they knew each other so well, because they were each other. They're both Lokis. They're cut from the same cloth, really. Setting up their relationship wasn't so far out of left field. I know a lot of people have an issue with it because it's either the most audacious form of self-masturbation out there, or some weird type of incest. I don't know which side of the argument you're on that one. I just see it as two people who absolutely understand one another. So that's why I don't like the fact that Sylvie at the very end is the one that betrays Loki, because the whole series was him realizing that he's literally betrayed every single person he's ever loved. He's a liar, he's mischievous, and it's not him just accepting that, it's also him growing from that, and him finally deciding to trust somebody and fight for somebody, even though technically it's himself still. But it's still nice to see that when she ultimately betrays him and still kills Kang, or this variant of Kang, I should say, despite all of the warnings and even Loki's plea that she shouldn't. I guess it makes sense for a character, but really how they were setting up her growth as well, it doesn't. So that's the only thing I didn't like about the finale. And then it sets up, obviously, the multiverse, which we will be seeing very heavily in the next few MCU films. It could also be setting up the potential plot threads that will lead to things such as the X-Men and the mutants coming into the MCU. Or it could just end right then and there. But it is interesting to see where the stories are going to go from here, because like I said, this fails as a series. It succeeds as a stepping off point for the future of the MCU. And I'm very curious to see how Kevin Feige is going to connect all these threads, especially since he's said many times, and we've seen it now, that these series are connected with the movies in various different ways, but much more than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or any of the other Marvel TV shows that have come before this. It's going to be a very interesting next few years, and I'm very excited to see where it's going to go. So like I said, overall, I enjoyed the series, but I felt it was lacking any significant substance. It didn't have those provoking thoughts that you got from WandaVision, which was about a woman dealing with her own grief and loss of loved ones. It didn't have the political ideologies that are discussed in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I guess you could say it just felt like a normal TV show. So I guess in a way it sort of succeeded in that. But for what we've been getting in the MCU TV shows like lately, it should have been more. At the beginning, it was definitely leaning into that philosophy of what is the difference between predestination and free will. And I felt like it sort of didn't have a proper approach to discussing that really, really dense philosophical issue and subject. So I felt like it just sort of took the easy road to get to the end of the story instead of really dealing with that big concept. But I don't know. That's just my opinions on the show. So let me know what you guys thought of the show. If you liked it, if you hated it, let me know all that in the comments down below. And if you like this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share it and do all that stuff. And be sure to follow us on all the social medias. And thank you very much, guys. And I've been Mike from the N.G.F podcast page. Take care.